Hello everybody. In this video, you are going to see how you can use the Microsoft Excel to perform coin toss simulations. As you know that in probability, you keep using the examples of fair coins and unfair coins to understand some of the basic concepts in probability. But let's say you were to consider an experiment where you take a coin and toss it a million times and record the outcomes of each of these coin tosses. But practically, it's not possible. So, what is the way out? So, the solution is that you ask the computer to do these coin tosses for you. And you can get the computer to toss the coin as many times as possible. So, let's quickly go over to Excel and see how we can very simply use MS Excel to do coin tosses. Okay, so there you are. Before we actually start simulating coin tosses, let us first learn about a function in Excel which is going to be useful in this particular exercise. And the function is randbetween. So this is a function which asks for two input values, as you can see, the bottom and the top. Let's give two arbitrary numbers, 1 as the bottom and 10 as the top. We'll press enter to execute this formula, and you see that it has generated a value of 1. But this is not enough to help us understand how this randbetween function works. So what we are going to do is we are going to run this formula multiple times and see what are the different kinds of outputs that are generated. So there are a whole bunch of outputs out here, and what you will realize is that randbetween 1 comma 10 generates numbers from 1 to 10. You are not going to get anything below 1 or anything above 10. And very importantly, this function randbetween generates integer values. Now there is something very important that we must know about randbetween function. What is clear is that yes, it has generated numbers from 1 to 10. But what is the probability distribution of getting these numbers? What is the probability of getting 1? What is the probability of getting 5 when we use such a formula? So it turns out that when you use randbetween function, then the numbers that it generates will have uniform probability distribution. What does that mean? It simply means that in a randbetween 1 comma 10 function, the probability of getting 1 is same as probability of getting 2, and so on and so forth until the probability of getting 10. So they are all the same, right? Now the question is, how do we use randbetween function to simulate a coin toss? So let's see how we can do that. Suppose if we were to say randbetween 0 comma 1. Just stop for a moment and then ask yourselves what kind of outcomes you would see when you execute this formula randbetween 0 comma 1. Yes, absolutely. So it is going to generate numbers which are either 0 or 1. And it is going to generate numbers 0 and 1 with equal probabilities. So let's execute this formula here. Well, on this particular instance, you have got 1. Let us repeat this formula in different cells and then see what are the outcomes. Yes, you get several zeros and then you get several ones. All right. Now, what has this got to do with A coin toss. In a coin, you have two outcomes, heads or tails. The rand between function allows us to get outcomes zeros and ones. Now, the trick is that if you can tell the computer that, look, whenever you get zero, you consider that you have got heads, and whenever you get one, consider that you have got tails, and that's about it. But how do we factor in this particular idea in the simulation? So the way we do it is by using an if statement. You say if. Now all if statements have these inputs. What should follow after the if statement, after you open the bracket, is that you should first provide a logical test. Then you should give a value which is to be considered when the logical test is true. And you also need to give a value where the logical test is false. So in our case here, the logical test is going to be rand between 0, comma 1. So this is the logical test. Now this is the function. So the logical test is rand between 0, comma 1 equal to 0. Okay. Now if this is true, meaning if rand between 0, comma 1 gives me an output of 0, I will consider it that I have gotten a heads, or else I will consider that I have got tails. Let's look at this formula once again. So what is this formula all about? All it tells you is that if rand between 0, comma 1 gives me an outcome of 0, then I will consider that the coin toss has given me heads. And if the outcome is 1, I will consider that the coin toss has given me tails. Let's run this formula in this cell. Yeah. So what it means is that in this particular coin toss, you have got tails. Now, why is it so? It only means that the rand between function, when it was executed, it must have given the value of 1, which is why the computer tells me that, look, you have got tails. Let's run this particular command multiple times. And there now you can see that you have got a number of heads and a number of tails in all these coin tosses. Now the most important question. The coin that you have simulated in this particular column, is this a fair coin or is it a biased coin? The answer is that this is a fair coin. Now let's understand why. Let's come back to the function which we used uh, in this particular column. We had used the function rand between 1 comma 10, and then we have learned that this particular function generates values with equal probabilities, meaning the probability of getting 1 is going to be the same as the probability of getting any number from 2 to 10. Likewise, in this formula, rand between 0 comma 1 is going to generate zeros and 1 with equal probabilities. What does that mean? 50% of the occasions I'm going to get 0, and 50% of the occasions I'm going to get 1. And since I'm assigning heads to the value of 0 and tails to the value of 1, I'm generating heads and tails as an output, each with 50% chance of occurrence. And in a coin, if you have 50% chance of getting heads and 50% chance of getting tails, all it means is that this is a fair coin. So now what we will do is we will do a small exercise, which essentially is like doing an experiment. we are going to consider a fair coin and we are going to toss it, say, 1,000 times. And we are going to look at the outcomes of each of these 1,000 coin tosses and then verify as to whether the number of heads roughly equals the number of tails. Now remember, in a simulation such as this, if you were to simulate 1,000 coin tosses, let's say it's a fair coin, it is very rarely that you are going to find that there are 500 exactly heads and exactly 500 tails. That will be a very rare event. However, by and large, you will get heads which are around 500 and the remaining will be tails. And then once we have the 1,000 outcomes of 1,000 coin tosses, we will do some basic descriptive statistics with that. So let's go over to a new Excel sheet and simulate 1,000 coin tosses. Okay, so what I have done here is just written down some basic important points about this experiment. So this coin is going to be a fair coin, and which means that the probability of heads for this coin is 0.5 and probability of tails is also 0.5. And we are going to simulate 1,000 coin tosses. So let's first have some columns labeled. So this is toss and this is the outcome. And so we are going to have tosses from 1 to 1,000. So we begin with toss number 1, and then what we'll have is toss number 2, toss number 3, toss number 4, and so on and so forth. And we are going to have 1,000 coin tosses. But you need not keep typing 1, 2, 3, 4. We are going to just use a small trick. So every number in the next cell is going to be 1 plus the value in the previous cell. And now if you keep dragging this, you are going to get first toss, second toss, third toss, fourth toss, fifth, and so on. But then we are going to have 1,000 tosses. But that doesn't mean that we are going to drag this for about 1,000 cells. Here again, we use a trick. Since toss number 1 is in the 7th row, the 1,000th toss is going to be in B1006. So when we go right up to that particular cell, type anything over there, go back to this particular formula, copy this, and then paste it across the entire column and say Control V. So now if you see, we have this particular column ready. So this is toss number 1, and with Control and down arrow, you can see that the last toss is toss number 1,000. Now let us simulate the outcomes in this outcome column. Here we say equal to if ran between 0, 1, if that is equal to 0, then consider that the outcome is heads, else consider that the outcome is tails. Right. So what it means is that the first coin toss is heads, and likewise we'll have to get the outcomes for all the 1,000 coin tosses. Well, so then in order to make it faster, just type in something over here with a Control and up arrow key, go to the first cell, copy this particular formula by doing Control C, and then do Control and Shift with a down arrow. It goes to the last cell in this column and just paste the formula in this entire column by Control V. Right, so let's check. So this is the first outcome, and with a Control down arrow, I see that the 1000 toss has also been simulated. Right, so if you look at in this column, you have heads and tails, and that's what it's supposed to be. So we will just tidy up this particular uh, these columns a little bit. We'll make it bold, and then we are also going to center the entries in these columns so that they look nice. Okay, so now what we are going to do is count the number of heads and tails in this column, meaning out of 1000 coin tosses, how many have yielded heads and how many have yielded tails. So let's have this number of heads, and that's what we are going to uh, put over here. And we are also going to have number of tails. Now let's find out the number of heads. For this, we have a very nice formula. But first of all, we will have to look at this whole range of this particular column. So the first outcome is in C7, and the last entry in this column is C106. Okay, so here we use this formula called countif, followed by the range, and the range is C $6 colon C $1006. So this is the range. All right. And now the criteria. What is criteria here? It simply means that what is it that I'm looking for in this particular column. Here I am looking for heads. So I'm going to type H. And remember, this heads is going to be in quotation marks. Yeah, so what it tells me is that out of 1000 coin tosses, 504 of the coin tosses has shown up heads. How many tails? Well, I don't have to really write the whole formula once again. All I can do is I can copy this cell, Control C, and then paste it here by doing Control V, which means that I am going to repeat the same formula. But remember, since I am wanting to know the number of tails in this particular cell, I need to replace this heads with T and press enter once again. All right, now you see. One important thing you will have to remember is that whenever you have formulas in any of the Excel sheet, every time you press an enter button or every time you press an F9 key, the whole sheet recalculates itself. So this particular sheet is live, and we have not frozen the outcomes of these 1000 coin tosses. So with every enter button or with every press of F9, the whole sheet is going to change. But that really doesn't matter. So what is this 400 and 515 telling us? That there are 485 heads and 515 tails in a total of 1000 coin tosses. Now, if our simulation is right and if everything has gone fine, both these numbers should add up to 1000. And in fact, they are. But remember one thing. Have we got exactly 500 heads and 500 tails? No. Okay. Why? Because after all, this is a simulation. It's like doing a real life experiment on a computer. And it is very rarely that you are going to get exactly 500 heads and 500 tails. Okay, so what I have done here is generated a bar graph based on the data which has been obtained from the simulation. Before I end this particular video, I just want you to appreciate the fact once again that we very rarely get exactly 500 heads and 500 tails when you simulate a fair coin and when the total number of tosses is equal to 1000. This is a live Excel sheet, which means that whenever you input a new formula or execute a formula again, or whenever you press an F9 button, the whole sheet recalculates itself. So what I'm now doing is I am continuously pressing the F9 key, and you will see that the number of heads and tails are very close to 500, but extremely rarely they will be equal to 500. Right. But the fact that the number of heads and tails are close to 500 tells us that yes, the simulation is all right. So I hope you like this video. What I'm going to do in the next video is to show you how to simulate an unfair coin.